Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's training industry webinar, Building Buzz, How to Spark Demand for Your Leadership Development Program. So hi, I'm Liz Spade, the Events Marketing Specialist here at Training Industry, and I'm thrilled to have you with us here today. Before we get started, though, I would like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items to help you interact with our speakers and get the most out of today's program. So it looks like everybody's kind of in the chat now, which is exactly where I'm going. If you haven't done so, open up those chat windows and let us know where you're joining us from today. I am seeing people all over the world. This is super cool. Thank you for joining us. I'm coming from Raleigh, North Carolina, but feel free to use this chat window to interact with our speaker with any comments as well as questions. This is going to be a very interactive session with our speakers. We will be addressing your questions throughout as well as having some interactive chat prompts. So keep those chats open and let's hear what you have to say. Additionally, we would love to hear about what you've learned from today's social media. So please follow Bluepoint Leadership Development on LinkedIn and hashtag TI webinars as you share your favorite takeaways with your colleagues. And when this webinar ends, you should receive a short evaluation survey. We always welcome your feedback on things like the content, speakers, topics, or anything else you would like to share with us. So be sure to complete that survey after the event. And as always, today's webinar will be recorded and archived on trainingindustry.com, and you will receive a follow-up email from us that will include the link to the on-demand program for you to share with your team. If you've attended one of our programs in the past, thank you so much for joining us again. And if this is your first webinar with us, welcome. At Training Industry, we offer dozens of webinars with subjects ranging from AI, analytics, to onboarding, upskilling, and reskilling. We cover about every topic relevant to leaders of training organizations around the globe. And now to get started, let me hand it off to Joan Peterson and Neil Bryant to introduce themselves for this very exciting session.
Yeah, thanks so much, Liz, and welcome everyone. We're super excited to be here and to talk about this idea of, well, how do I spark interest in my leadership development program? It's a challenge that we see showing up in many organizations. You've done the hard part, like you've put together this phenomenal learning experience. You've got great facilitators. The content matches with what the business needs. Yet participation levels aren't what you're looking for. Either the class is filled from a registration perspective and there are some no-shows, or even having trouble getting folks in the door. The barrier isn't the quality of the program. What we're seeing is that the barrier is what's showing up inside organizations. What we're competing against, what are on leaders' plates today. They have overbooked calendars. They are in the midst of continuous change. So many things are competing for their time and attention that this is what gets put last on their list. So as we go through this, my hope is we'll be able to share some strategies. My hope is you'll be able to share some of your best practices as we go through some of the content. I've grown up in the leadership development space. So I've spent my entire career going on 30 years building leadership development programs. And here's what I wish were true. I wish that, and of course, anyone who can tell me what movie this comes from, bonus points, I'm showing my age here. I wish that if we built it, we built these phenomenal, thank you, yes, Field of Dreams, one of my favorite movies. I wish that if we built these phenomenal experiences, it meant that people would not just show up. They would show up, they would participate, they would embrace what we had for them. We know that unfortunately that's not the truth. We know that, yeah, we can build it and we could have people not be there, not showing up, not participating. Great leadership development programs don't market themselves. So this isn't, how can I just be this phenomenal marketer? This is, how do I look at it's a mindset shift. How do I look at my role isn't just building these phenomenal experiences. It's how do I make sure they're part of the fabric of the organization? And what can I do to make sure that people are clamoring to come? I love that, Bridget. If you cater, they will come. When the latter half of my career, I've worked with Bluepoint. First half of my career, I worked inside organizations, and we did find that if you serve food, people tend to come as well. We're going to talk about more than serving food. In fact, that's not even on our agenda. Super excited to share again some of our thoughts and to hear some of your thoughts on how do we build buzz around these leadership development programs. A little bit about me. I shared a little bit already. My name's Joan Peterson. I've been in the L&D space my entire career, in both inside organizations and as part of Bluepoint. Neil and I work for an organization called Bluepoint Leadership Development. We work with leaders all over the globe. And yes, we build leadership development programs. We specialize in topics like how do I help leaders be better coaches, leading change, leading innovation, emotional intelligence, building resilience, everything that really equips leaders to lead the best they can in our current environment. And we also have a coaching arm of our organization where we do one-on-one and team coaching. Delighted to be joined by my colleague Neil, and I'll have Neil introduce himself as well.
Well, good day to you, Joan, and greetings to everyone out there. Thanks for jumping in. I'm coming to you from a cold and snowy Western Pennsylvania here in the U.S., but delighted to be part of this program. And I believe deeply in the field that we've all committed ourselves to, and I'm privileged to serve in it as both a leadership development practitioner as well as an executive coach. And my role here at Bluepoint is to influence how we bring to market, how we design, and how we execute exceptional development opportunities for our clients. And I'm particularly excited about this topic because in my background, not unlike Jones, I've been part of very large organizations where I've been on both the receiving side and the delivering side of leadership development programs. And so I have a bank of experience I can pull on what works and what doesn't. And my great hope, to use Jones' phrase, is that that experience proves some value for you today as you think about how this could be beneficial in your organization.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. And again, we welcome your thoughts, your questions in the chat pod. If we don't get to any of the questions throughout the course of our time, we'll certainly answer them. We'll get back to you following the session. I know my colleague Hannah put a copy of the deck in the chat pod. If you didn't get a copy of the deck, she'll drop it in again in a little bit. So look out for that as well. I would love to hear a little bit about you all. And if I could ask you to use the chat pod to answer this question, what best describes your situation right now? Are you one, building a program, two, relaunching or refreshing a program, three, we have a strong program, weaker, maybe turnout, or strong turnout, I want more demand. So love it. Yeah, lots of ones, love that. Bunch of threes and fours. Oh, thanks so much for your engagement. Um, Pretty much all over the board, but a lot of ones. It's interesting, as Neil suggested, the two of us sort of have experience being in the L&D side, inside organizations. And I've been like one, two, three, and four. Throughout my career, I've been involved in building, relaunching, strong program, not great turnout, and a program, strong turnout, want more demand. And my hope is, again, you'll walk away with some immediately usable thoughts, strategies, ideas to whether you're launching, you're relaunching, or whether you're looking for a stronger turnout or demand. I have another question for you. And I'd love for you to use the chat pod as well so we can get to know a little bit about who's here. And the question is this: what's the number one reasons leaders, don't say yes? Like, what would you say if you could say it in one word? You love it. It's already coming up. Time, buy-in, time, budget, time, 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 time. That's what they're busy, right? There's business uncertainty as well. Gosh, I don't have the time or money. Awareness, I think, is one we don't think of quite often. Is I don't need that. Bandwidth, I think, is a huge issue, Molly. I think you're right. So when we look at this idea of what we kind of know what's getting in the way. So, and we'll talk a little bit about, okay, what are some of the things that we can do to really get them to a place where they feel it is worth their time, it is worth their bandwidth.
Hey,
Yeah.
Joan, if I
Go
could, yeah,
ahead.
can I jump in just for a second, Joan? I
Mhm.
saw something that's like I think was from Shauna that really struck a chord with me, and that is, I think it's too often we hear it's time, right? And competing things, and we hear that all the time. And of course, those are valid. And yet, what strikes me is if any of those individuals all of a sudden got a phone call from home about a family health issue or something happened that they had to deal with, there's always enough time. So to me, what it comes more down to is it's not time, it's do they see the value that's worth devoting time to that compared to something else? So um, time becomes the easy one. What it really means is I'd rather be spending my time on something else because I think there's more return for that. And what we want to talk about today, and I loved what Joan had in that first polling question, is what we're going to talk about today doesn't apply uniquely to a specific phase of your program creation or rollout. It's universal. We're going to be talking about an approach, a philosophy, and tactics that if you can have the organization embrace, what happens is the excuse or the reason of time goes away because the perceived value is elevated. So we want to encourage you to adopt that mindset of, I can't make their word go away, but I can make their belief change.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Neil. And a couple of folks in the chat pod. So Shanae, love that. Making the time. It's a commitment issue. Where am I committing my time? And then Tom, priorities and values, right? Like, what am I valuing? What am I prioritizing? Love that. One more question from a polling perspective. If your program were a product, what's its current perception inside your organization? Would you say it's nice to have, beneficial, important, or essential? Oh, Dolores, I love. I see a couple of essentials, which I love, because that was not my experience. My experience was more beneficial, important, and again, yeah, I love that, Leah. And again, I wish that, and it's what Neil's talking about, and what some of you were talking about in the chat pod, that how do we change the perception that this is essential, that this is a valuable use of our time and our resources inside the organization. And part of what, again, what I hope flavor of the week, yes, what I hope we'll share is how do we start to shift the mindset inside the organization? What we'd like to share, it's a 5-phase process. It's not intended to be sequential. It's more of a mindset shift. If we're looking to be an essential part of the fabric of the organization, our leadership development program, what are some of the things that we can do to generate interest? And a couple of things about this process, again, not intended to be sequential. And we do have a guide that goes along with this, which you will get access to after, and it'll come from Bluepoint. So a bit of a partner product to the partner brochure. Neil, why don't you talk a bit about Neil designed it, so I'm going to have Neil talk about it.
Well, spoiler alert was going to come at the end. Yeah,
Oh,
we
sorry.
actually build a document. It's not lengthy, but think of it as a tool that you and your colleagues can use as a almost like a mini workbook to check yourself against some of the concepts or tactics that we're going to explain so you can actually think and write in it. Here's where we've done really well, or here's something we should reconsider. So it's almost like an interactive, well, it's a hard copy, but it's an interactive thought process along the 5 dimensions we're going to talk about now, so you can use it in your own environment.
Thanks, Neil. Sorry for the spoiler alert. And again, it goes through these 5 phases, these 5 thoughts. And the first is around crafting the message. The second is around managing as a change initiative. Like when we think about our L&D program, do we manage it as a change initiative? Do we see it as not just the program, but part of the larger organization? Do we leverage stakeholders? Like, have we thought about who are our stakeholders? Do we have a board? Do we have people who are advising us and who can represent us? And what's our strategy? Is our strategy around cohort, is it invitation? Is it application? Is it mandate? So it's even thinking through what's our strategy. And we'll also talk about, well, how does this leadership development program contribute to our culture as an organization? How do we help people talk about their experience, and how do we help people talk about and apply what they've learned and have that become part of the culture, part of an ongoing story about the leadership development program and their own development. So again, we'll go through each 5 of these, and my hope is you'll leave with some tactics and strategies. And my hope is you'll share again in the chat pod what are some of your best practices. I'd like to start first with this idea of crafting the message.
Joan, tell you what, before we
Yeah,
go to that, can I just jump in and make a
sure.
comment on this slide? She hates when I do this, but
Not
this
at
is
all.
um, I want to take a pause for the group because before we start to get into the meat here, there is there's a mind shift that we want to encourage everyone to step into, right? We're all coming from a place where we do we do exceptional work, right? You do exceptional work. You're very good at what you do. That's why you're in the roles that you are. You're trying to change the organization. You believe in lifting people up and helping them become what they can become. And so we're all constantly looking at our work in terms of what I do. The way to help create buzz about your program is to quiet that tendency about how good we are and how good our work is quiet that and shift it more into a service orientation. How am I delivering value for the organization? And the 5 pieces that Joan's going to walk you through here all fit into that mindset. So it's almost for half an hour, pretend you're not a crafter, designer, and a builder, and pretend you're in marketing. Pretend that your job is to connect with the audience and let them drive what you build. Now, in doing that, there is a what we're attempting to overcome is this. Well, I want to paint a picture for you. Pardon the pun. Imagine you're an artist. Imagine you're a painter, and you've spent years creating these beautiful works of art, and suddenly someone discovers you, and they say, you know what, you are really good. Um, we think you should have a premiere. You should have a showing. So you rent out space, you hang up your inventory of beautiful art, you send out invitations, you do social media feeds. It's 7 o'clock the night of the premiere. You open the doors and you're just hoping somebody comes. We've all been there. We've all had that sensation. What we want to do today is minimize that feeling of angst and anticipation and shift it into certainty and excitement by changing our mind from, boy, I hope it works, into I'm certain that it will, because it's not magic, right? There are steps that we can take. And Joan, I'm sorry for elaborating on that, but I think it's a really important mindset that I want to invite the folks to join us in, even if it's just temporarily.
Yeah, I love the example of the artist and the art show. Again, like you created the art, let's hope they come. And Melissa in the chat pod said, we want to be strategic business partners with an expertise in
Yes,
learning and development. I think
yes.
beautifully said. So again, I appreciate Neil, you jumping in, continue to jump in. And let's talk about that first one, that crafting the message. And I don't know how many people like the movies. And my guess is for those of you who have been to the movies, you know what this screen is. And I do like previews. I know some people don't like them. I'm a big preview girl. I like to sit and be like, oh, I'm going to see that. I'm not going to see that. I mean, think about what movie trailers do. They help us feel, they help us recognize what the movie will feel like. Well, if we decide to go to the movie, what we can expect, what will it be worth our time and our money? And again, many of them are done really, really well. Think about when you craft your message for your leadership development program. Do you craft it like a movie trailer where people know what to expect? They know that it's worth their time. And again, I fall into this sometimes as well. Or do we craft our message around our leadership development program like a syllabus, like a list of scenes. Anyone guess what's this syllabus? What movie is this syllabus from? It is, Molly, it's Toy Story. I mean, think about it. If you saw the trailer to Toy Story, might you get excited to see it? What if someone handed you the syllabus of Toy Story? Like, here's a list of the sets. Oh, I really want to see it because I want to see Meeting the Toys, or I'm really interested in the Claw. Yet I think quite often when we craft our message, we give a bit of a syllabus. Like, here are the topics we're going to explore, and here's why you should want to come. So here are some thoughts around how to craft a movie trailer and not a syllabus. One is to really meet the leaders where they are. Start with the leader reality, name the pressure, the problem, that the challenges that they're facing. The second is, stating a clear promise. Like, this isn't a list of topics. Like, here's a list of outcomes. You're investing your time. Here's what you can expect. Not, we're going to do this, this, and this. The third is around stimulating intrinsic value. How can you connect with purpose? How can you connect with mastery? How can you connect with growth? How can you connect with autonomy? How do we help stimulate that intrinsic motivation for the leaders to want to be a part of this? Be concrete and specific. You'll be able to. And I also think quite often leaders have no idea what the time commitment is. Are we really clear about the total time ask, about the cadence around what they can expect? Because they are busy individuals. So when we're looking to craft a message or an invitation, if you will, my hope is we think more movie trailer. How do we help people feel as if this is meant for them? Not, here's a list of everything we're going to do. So this next slide, I have kind of a sample invite letter, and I'm going to ask you to use the chat pod with how did we do? Like, what are some of the things that you think don't work so well? This is more of a kind of what not to do, a little bit of a preview there. So this comes from L&D. It's to all people leaders. And it says, okay, to all people leaders, in support of our strategic priorities, we're running a leadership development program aimed at enhancing leadership capabilities. We'll explore topics such as feedback, coaching, conflict management, and many other topics. You'll be receiving a calendar invite shortly. Programmers required for all people leaders. So again, I'd love your input on anything you like about this. It's a snoozer. Yeah, it needs to be more exciting, right? Too much text. It's boring. It's like, who cares? And to me, doesn't want to make me come, right? It's not inspirational. It's not motivational. I think it also comes from L&D. I wonder, should it be coming from other people? It's to all people leaders. It starts with, based on our strategic priorities. That's an organizational need. It doesn't help me. It's very factual. There's no emotional connections. We made this, now you do it. And it's mandatory. I mean, lots of things wrong with it. And not optional. Oh, joy, Gail. Gail, you're getting online for this, right? And what about this? Neil, I'm going to ask for your feedback on this because it's addressed to you. So it goes to Neil. A little bit at least thought out, and it comes from Neil's manager, right? I'm excited to invite you to join, or it comes from a program sponsor, or it comes from a senior executive. As a result, you'll be able to, here's how much time it'll take. There'll be no role plays. You'll be able to apply what you're learning to current leadership challenges. So I'd love to hear, what do you like here in the chat pod? Is there anything, what am I missing? What would you change? And I'm going to ask Neil for your thoughts on this as well. Not perfect, but a little bit better.
Yeah, what I really liked on the previous slide, Joan, was Bethany's comment. When I saw this, I had the same reaction that she did. What number one is the tone of it is, we've done something and now you need to do something. Which, if you think about the psychology of that, it's a very organizational controlling message, right? What we know, Joan mentioned it before, I am an enormous supporter of Daniel Pink and Susan Fowler's work on motivation. We want leaders to show up who want to show up. And by an organization telling people what to do, we've removed autonomy. We've removed the ability for choice, which is a demotivator. Okay. And Bethany, I thought she nailed it. That first email, the tone is, we've done some work and here's what you need to do. Come on, right? That just doesn't do it for me. What I really like about the second one, and Joan mentioned it, although you don't see it in text. We're going to talk about this a little bit later, but I want to encourage people to give a lot of consideration to, you're inviting your people to become better. And the people who accept the invitation are the ones you want to invest in anyway, right? So from whom does the invitation come? Just give that some thought. We're going to talk about it a little bit later.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Neil. Love all the comments continuing to come. My invitation to you is to think about, how are we inviting people? How are we crafting the message? And again, that's part of it. Think movie trailer, not syllabus. And gosh, I'm to blame here as well. And I've been doing this a lot of years, and there are times where I find myself listing the topics we're going to cover. Um, I don't know if there are any Swifties in the room. And if there are any Swifties in the room, I don't know how many of you saw this screen when you decided, like, I want to try and get tickets to the Eras Tour. Think about what happens, whether you are looking to buy concert tickets, or you're looking to go to a restaurant that's quite crowded. Like, quite often you can't decide the day of, I want to go see Taylor Swift. We need to decide earlier. Like, here's when the tickets are dropping. So my daughter is yeah, wait list is not a bad thing. And that's the story here. How cool would it be if your leadership development program, people are like, all right, the dates are dropping on this date and I have a pre-sale code. That doesn't happen. So how do we create what a lot of concerts do? They create scarcity. Of course, this comes from um, Cialdini, Robert Cialdini, in his book on influence, and it's an influence tactic. Are we able to create scarcity? Think about, again, concerts do it really well. And I think in leadership development, we don't do it as well. So how can we create that velvet rope, right? That generate buzz? How do we create the wait list, if you will? Here's what creating scarcity does. It avoids procrastination. It reduces procrastination. I can't decide the day of that I want to see Taylor Swift. It increases perceived value. There's a wait list. Oh, it must be something that I need to be a part of. It signals that the experience is worth protecting the time. So we get into that time piece. It also generates commitment. Like, I buy a ticket or I make a reservation, I am going to show up and be there because of the fact that I know that there's a scarcity around it. So we look at this idea of scarcity. There are things I think we need to avoid, and there are things that I think become important around scarcity. How do we create scarcity? You make the constraint visible, right? Only a certain number of leaders or a certain number of cohorts, or you have an application process. Maybe there's a clear deadline. You need to apply or you need to register by this date. Some of the things that don't work out so well is sort of the fake scarcity. You have the countdown timers. You've all seen them. Like, well, if you don't book this in the next 10 minutes, like, the offer's going to go away. Like, everyone knows that's a false countdown timer. Or just saying there are limited seats, the in quotes, when there aren't limited seats. You also need to be careful of, is it over exclusive, or does it conflict with access goals within the organization? One of like, I was talking about the session with one of my colleagues, and she said, this is the only thing that we did to generate interest in our program. We created scarcity. She said, I said to the business partners, you each have 2 seats, blah, blah, blah. So in her mind, scarcity is what generated buzz. The more I talked to her, it wasn't just scarcity. Yes, they had invitations and each business unit was limited, but a lot of the things that we'll talk about later, she did as well. She had stakeholder buy-in. She had a great program. She had buzz following the workshop with some of the success stories. And then it turned into this idea of scarcity fed the workshop. What is is not an option and they know it. So I see a couple of questions. What if scarcity gives you the opposite result? Leaders get upset there aren't enough sessions. So it's a nice problem to have. I mean, I'll give a few thoughts and Neil, I'll ask for your thoughts as well. I think, and here I'll tell you what my colleague did. They had a wait list and they said they ran 2 or 3 cohorts every year. So if you're on the wait list, you came up toward the end of the year. You just had to wait to participate. To me, that's ideal. Neil, thoughts on what if scarcity gives you the opposite result and leaders get upset?
Yeah, I'm glad that I'm trying to see who raised that question. Oh, it's you. Yes, I think it's a great question because, a lot of what Joan and I are talking about today has to be contextualized into your organization. So we're not trying to give you the rights and the wrongs, but things to contemplate. Because given a certain culture or a certain way of doing business in your organization, you'll have to ferret out what feels right for you, right? Yeah, creating over demand or scarcity then from a delivery point of view could also be problematic. So we want to think through the strategy and just be conscious about it, about how it could be received. And also, if I can, Joan, I want to comment on Gail's question.
Yeah.
But I wish we had more than an hour because my initial reaction to this question would be I'd love to have a conversation with Gail because I would ask, well, why is a program that is development and orientation mandatory? We'll get to this a little bit later, but to me, whenever we say you're going to be developed and you're going to like it, we're already starting with the wrong message. Now, is there a way that we can encourage everyone to participate in the program where they feel like they have choice? Yes, I think there are ways to do that. So I'm sorry, Gail, I'm giving you this meh response, but reach out to me afterwards. I'd love to talk to you because we want to create an environment where even if something is mandatory, it doesn't feel mandatory. We want people to exercise choice to participate. We'll talk about that a little bit more on when we're building our board of directors and our people of influence. What can they do and say so that it's received differently?
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Neil. And Gail had a comment in the box responding to it. And Melissa, you had almost the same question. When is attending? When attending is not an option and they know it, right? Again, as Neil said, we'll share some thoughts and you live inside your organization. My hope is this is something you'll consider. Gail, because people are ticking boxes and not strategically growing. Neil's going to have a bit of a coronary over there.
We need more than an hour, Joan. We need more than
Love
Gail,
again. Love the
call me, send me an email. I'd love to talk to you about this.
love the interaction. Um, Anyone know where this image is from? Anyone know where this tea kiosk is? It is. It's in Epcot and Disney. I love that people knew this. I was in Disney in January and I was with my family and I was walking with my brother and my daughter. And it's in China in Epcot. And it's 80 something degrees, 85 degrees, so it's quite warm. And as we passed by this tea kiosk, we noticed there were like 100 people online. And yes, there are long lines in all of Disney, but it was 85 degrees. And we're thinking, why is there such a long line at this tea kiosk? And my brother's a foodie. So I said, like, this wasn't he had a list of all the things that we needed to try. And this was not on his list. I was like, well, how come this wasn't on your list? Look at the long line. So he put into chat, like, what are some of the reasons why there's a long line at this kiosk? And do you know, chat gave him back and they're like, sometimes people get online because there's a long line and they assume it must be good. Like that FOMO piece that we talked about, a bit of scarcity. This again, it's a Cialdini principle. It's around generating social proof. Like people get online because there's a long line and it must be good. So I wonder, how can we generate social proof for our leadership development programs? Here's what it does. It builds trust quickly. I mean, think about what social proof does. If I see people had a really good experience and they talk about that experience, like I trust that. It reduces the time risk objection. It now becomes a an opportunity for me to say, okay, yeah, I have to make time for this. Create social norms. It improves manager permission. I mean, sometimes that permission piece is what keeps people. It's like, okay, there's success stories coming out of this. There's proof around it. And then that FOMO, that fear of missing out. So when we look at this idea of social proof, employing social proof. One of our Neil and I's colleagues, she was talking to us about, she's a younger generation than I am. And she said, like, she was telling Neil and I, like, I don't buy anything. I don't hire a coach unless there's something to back it up, unless I see stories, unless I see reviews. So this idea of like, they're immediately like they're readily available for folks. So think about this idea of, well, how are you creating social proof with your leadership development programs? And here's some ways you can do it. Alumni micro stories or respected leader endorsement. Do you have leaders talking about it? Like sponsor visibility. Who's sponsoring it? Are they visible? What are the tangible takeaways? And Neil, I know you have a story that I think is a really good one to share around social proof and how it starts to generate interest in the program.
I don't know if which is a better lead-in, Joan, your invitation or Tom's comment in the chat. It's about stories. It's about stories. And actually, I want to give you two quick examples, guys, folks. Real life stories with one of our customers. We had a CEO who was very reluctant to invest in a leadership development program, and it was I can't imagine any of you have experienced that, right? They're hesitant to invest the funds to do something like this. He finally agreed to do so. Fast forward to the end of there was a year-long leadership development program for emerging leaders. So the up-and-comers in the organization, people they wanted to retain, I'm sorry, folks who they wanted to develop for future roles. At the end of the program, during a company-wide, this is a large company, thousand employees, during a company town hall, the CEO told two stories. This is the same person who was hesitating to spend the funds at the beginning. Both true stories. One is during this leadership development program, one of the participants came up with an idea that could save the company about $280,000 a year. And it arose when the cohort was working on leadership courage and finding your voice and being willing to speak up. And this individual, who otherwise would never have said anything, decided to take that opportunity and the new skill set, raise it up. The company embraced it. They enacted the idea and, in fact, did realize a savings of about $280,000 a year, which funded the entire leadership development program for the cohort for the entire year. So here's a CEO who is saying, it's not worth the money, now telling the story that one individual's idea, one individual benefit from being through the program can finance the whole program. The same CEO shared with the organization that following the 1 year program, 86% of the participants during that year either took on greater responsibility in the organization or were promoted. When the body of employees and leaders hear those type of stories, guess what happened to the demand for the program the next year, right? Everyone's saying, well, how do I get in line? So don't underestimate social proof. The key is we'll talk about this a little bit later, capturing and retelling stories and having a methodology to do that and identifying who are the right people to tell them.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that story. And I do think, Tom, you were saying people stories. How do we find them? How do we capture them? How do we tell them? They make a difference inside organizations, up, down, and across the organization. I'd like to transition to the second piece we'll talk about, and we won't spend a lot of time on this. It's around looking at your leadership development program as a change initiative. And this is around, how do I recognize that my leadership development program is in a bubble? I need to really think about it as part of the system. And one of the sort of metaphors that struck me was, I don't know if you're like me, but I'm one of these people who collects recipes, Instagram, Pinterest, online, and ask me how many of them I've actually made, right? Like I collect these recipes and they seem like a really good idea. And then today's Tuesday. I'm like, all right, tonight I'm going to make this one. Work is over, whatever, it's 6 o'clock, whatever. And I start to make it, or I start to think about making it. And I'm like, oh, I have to use a broiler. Oh, I didn't know I needed cornmeal. Oh, the prep time is 15 minutes, but cooking time, I want to eat now. So instead of making this cool recipe, this is what I have for dinner. So if we think about this idea of, collecting recipes, getting the click, that's a marketing tactic. Yes, it gets attention and we need to get attention, but adoption is what we're looking for in our leadership development program. In order for people to want to be a part of it and adopt it inside the organization, I need to not just I need to have them not just click yes. And part of that comes from thinking about leadership development. It's a mindset shift as a change process. I'm looking for people to adopt this, for organizations to adopt this. This comes from Cotter. This isn't to say, yes, you must employ Cotter's 8-phase change process in order for this to be successful. To me, it's a bit of a checklist. Which of these are you employing? Which of these might you need to maybe think about differently? And I'll go through them very quickly. Um, eh, Urgency, like why this leadership development program? Why now? What's the cost if we don't do it? Guiding teams, as Neil suggested, we'll talk about in a little bit. Who are the sponsors? Who are the champions? Have you tapped into alumni voices? We talked about the clear vision strategy. What's your clear promise? What's the audience? What's the path? How are you going to communicate? Who's the message coming from? Is it coming from multiple people? Are there repeated messages? Empowering is removing barriers, making the yes easy. Not just the yes easy to I'm going to sign up for it, but the yes easy to I'm going to adopt it. I'm going to not only be there, but be a full participant. We just talked about social proof. Those are capturing those quick, short term, sharing those stories. Then there's how do I maintain momentum? So I might have captured some stories in the first cohort or the first time out. How do I continue to refresh those stories? And then lastly, and we'll talk about this later as well, how do I and how does my leadership development program embed into systems and expectations? So when people are taking what they're learning back and they're applying it, how does that become part of the culture inside the organization? So I recognize that this is a list of 8 things. It's a lot of things to put on a slide. I would like you to use the chat pod here, and I love all your comments in the chat pod about the recipes. Which of these would you say you have implemented well? And Gail, great question. Gail has a question around momentum. Like how can we kind of continue the momentum piece? But I'd love to see as a group, what are some of the things, and you could just list the number. Do you think, yep, we do this really well? Or that's something that's on my radar screen that I'm starting to plan. Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Number 4, around making yes. Oh, lots of 4s, couple of 5s. Yeah, some 1s and 3s as well, but I saw a lot of 4s going really quickly. Fantastic. And again, just to kind of see what, if we create scarcity, that's interesting. If I create scarcity, how does it empower change? And I've created scarcity, right? So that people want in, that I remove the barrier to yes of getting them into that funnel if they want to participate. To me, they're 2 separate things. I love that question. What about which steps do you think maybe need more attention inside your organization? Like and I know the one came up around how do I maintain momentum? And I think that's a really good question. Let's see if that's a theme for the group. Again, lots of different ones coming up. Momentum, lots of 8s around culture. Yeah, silos across departments. So lots of different challenges as well. Again, this is intended to give you kind of an outline of what are some of the things I might want to consider. This idea of momentum, and I know that, of course, you know, time is of the essence here. Neil, anything to weigh in on the question about how do I maintain momentum? How do I refresh that proof each cycle?
Yeah, I think Joan, yeah, and just for you and me, Joan, I'm looking at the time and going, oh
I
man,
know.
how are we going to get through
We're
all
good.
of
We're
this?
good, Neil.
But I think in terms of momentum, it goes back to something that we mentioned at the very beginning, that regardless of what stage your program is in now, if you can adopt some of these mind shift and approaches that we're talking about, momentum will sustain itself, right? And we're about to jump into a piece on how to do that and building your board of directors and key stakeholders. But so I want to offer a thought of encouragement. Momentum will sustain itself if the approach we take in building, delivering, and celebrating your program is shared by your line leaders, that ownership and that recognition and the celebration sits outside of our organizations of HR and training and leadership development.
Yeah, yeah, thanks, Neil. Again, love the participation in the chat pod. I do want to shift us into, because we've talked a lot about this, how do I leverage stakeholders? Brittany, I love your comment. We use alumni, but the idea of sponsors, it's a bit of a different
Yeah.
lens. It's a bit of a different way to look at it. And I'll go through this metaphor quickly. How many of you have ever had a gym membership? And you go to the gym in January and it's really crowded. And then you go to the gym in February, March, and it's not as crowded. And when we look at this idea of, and here's what we hear join the gym with a friend, because then you have somebody who's your partner. Then you have somebody who will hold you, help you be committed. And part of the stakeholder piece is helping that with that commitment piece. Interest does not equal commitment. That commitment piece comes from, again, having the partner at the gym or having somebody outside, typically outside L&D, who can help drive participation. What we know about leadership development programs, that participation is mostly driven by trust. I trust that this is a good use of my time. Permission. Um, I'm permitted to go, and permission is a timepiece as well, that I can be fully present and I'm not answering emails during it. And visibility. Senior leadership says that this is something important, or my colleagues, that social proof piece. Here's the thing with those three things. Most of that sits out of L&D. So if that's the case, who do you have who are people's partner at the gym? It's important to have this idea of a board of directors or stakeholders, that for lots of reasons. I mean, some of the clear reasons, and we've talked about these: credibility, permission, and prioritization. Like if I know that you're on the board of directors of this leadership development program, or you're a stakeholder, and you're visible inside the organization, it helps me push that to the top of my priority list. This group also has a bigger reach than I have in L&D. They're tied to the business. They can help talk about how what we're doing here relates to the business. And that also helps, of course, with application. Well, what we're doing inside the classroom, I can apply back to the job. When we look at, well, what are you looking for? I mean, again, you're looking for people with influence, large representation, whatever that looks like, whether it's silos, whether it's, different generations, whether it's different locations, credibility, somebody with access, somebody who's committed, who doesn't, yeah, I'll sponsor it and I'll show up and do a 30-second intro before the leadership development program. You want more than that. And diversity of perspective. I do think the board or those stakeholders can play a number of different roles around visibility, marketing and recruitment, manager enablement. As Neil suggested, they collect stories and that social proof, and they're part of the integration of the leadership development program. So it's no longer an L&D program; it's an organization program. Neil, would you like to weigh in on this as well?
Yeah, thanks, Joan. I think if there's any takeaway from today, that I think it really can flip the needle or move the needle on generating buzz about the program, It's this concept. And obviously, we're using capital letters, but it's not a real board of directors, right? But if you think about a board of directors, or some people call, like your knights of the round table or your missionaries, right? Or they're the individuals in the organization whose voice matters. And the key here is there's a phrase I like to use. I call it purpose authorship. Purpose authorship. So, okay, we're going to have a leadership development program. What's the purpose? Right? And the authorship of that purpose should come from your functional leaders, not from us. We're the masters of the education, the content, and an exceptional experience of making it real. But if it's not connected to the business results, then it's going to be a tactic. And you might get some compliance, but you're not going to get commitment. So the role of these individuals is that they are representative of what the business is trying to do. And the whole concept we want to get to, not literally, but figuratively, the concept is it's their program, not ours. We're going to build it and deliver it, but it's their program. And when you get to that place, you don't have to worry about buzz and demand because they become the voice of recruitment.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Neil. Janine, I love that Learning Advisory Committee. Really nice.
Yes, good.
Yeah,
Yes.
really nice title for it. How do you get them to participate? I'd love for anyone in the chat pod, if you have, you and Janine, how do you have you encouraged stakeholders? What have you done to get them to want to be part of it? Neil, any brief suggestions?
Yeah, just one, John, real quickly, just one. Here's some of these your comments are spot on, gang. Here's the key. When you define who the influential people are in your organization, and they aren't necessarily the people with the biggest titles, right? Who in the organization has that political capital that people attach themselves to? You go to those people and you ask them one question. And that question is, in the next 6 to 12 months, or whatever your scale might be, what's going to be required of your leaders that you think needs some support now or an introduction now? What's going to be required of your leaders? And that becomes the fulcrum of your dialogue. And the program then is built out from there. So identify those people, go see them, ask them that one question.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. And thanks, Corey, for adding to the chat pod as well. I do want to make sure we have time for our next two pieces. The next one is around developing a cohort strategy. And when we think about this, it's the age-old question, open enrollment or selection. And again, taking into the context of your organization, which fits, or thinking about what's worked and might I try the other. Neil, Jessica had a question in the chat pod. Maybe you could type a response in the chat pod of your one question. Um, and again, you'll have access to the slides, so I won't spend a lot of time diving into this. There are pros and cons to open enrollment. Some of the pros is yes, it's broad access, scales quickly, lower admin role, development is for everyone. The cons are, again, it's harder to ensure fit, less scarcity buzz, can skew to the already confident, right? Like, oh, open enrollment, I don't need that. Cohort dynamics can vary. So there are pros and cons around open enrollment. And there are pros and cons around selection, whether it's nomination or application um, or invitation, perceived higher value, better cohort quality potentially stimulates intrinsic motivation. Again, I know you have access to this. We just wanted to put them so that you think about, okay, which for us works and which for us works now. Again, we talked about invitation strategies that create buzz, whether it's the list exceeds the seats or whether it's personalized invitation like the one to Neil that you saw in the beginning, whether it's managers nominate or you have an application window, it's thinking about what's your strategy. So first it's okay, open enrollment or selection, and then what's my strategy? And again, there's no right answer because for some organizations, it's got to be this or it's got to be that, but it's knowing what the pros and cons are for each of those. And it's also, and this we talked about as well, like is it invitation or mandate? When it's a company initiative and it's a mandate, It's like, all right, attendance is mandatory. It feels like an assignment that I should do this. When it's an invitation, it's more personally motivating. It enables choice. It appeals to personal growth. Neil, I know that you have a few thoughts on this, recognizing that we have about 6 minutes left.
Yeah, I'm watching very carefully, Joan. The bottom line on this, and again, like it's contextual. I lean towards an invitation mentality. And the reason why is I want our leaders to be asking, how me, instead of why me. Right? There's a difference there. So think about your messaging and bringing people into that space of how me could be really, really helpful for you in generating buzz.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. I do want to spend just a few minutes on contributing to your culture, which is the last piece. And and this is about creating a highlight reel. So when we were designing this deck, I sent to our our web designer, like, I talked about a highlight reel, and I of course pictured a sports highlight reel, like, the goals in a soccer game, and what she came back to me is more illustrative of what we're talking about. Like, for those of you who are foodies, how many of you take pictures of these beautiful meals? And how do we have people taking pictures of how they're applying? How do we have people tell stories of what they're doing? It's that we're looking to create. Culture is the story that people repeat. And how do we enable that? And really that's the feel that we're looking to go with, getting people to sort of take those pictures. And there, what are best practices for collecting success stories? Neil talked about, our board of directors. How do we get people involved? How do we interview people after? Like, do we go to the alumni and ask for what one story can you share? And then, to me, yes, we need to collect them, but we need to communicate them. And there are lots of ways we can communicate them. And there's a lot of words on this slide. And again, I know you have a copy of the deck, so I'll just go through it briefly. There are ways for executive sponsors to communicate stories. First, we have to collect them. And there are ways for the alumni to own it. There are ways for managers to own it. And there are ways for business owners to own it. So look for a combination of these so that you not only, this is builds that momentum as well, you're continuously collecting stories and sharing the message. I am when I worked with an organization a few years back, and one of the modules we did was on leading innovation. And they talk about taking pictures of sort of the food that you've eaten. It was a big deal for them to come in and say, they're going to be asking me what came out of this. And they remembered the past cohorts. They did this and it saved the company this amount of money. So that there was a bit of they felt like was a bit of pressure. There was a little bit of pressure. And it really stemmed from the initial stories from that cohort. Are we able to do that? And then I think, and of course, I'd like to end with this. We only have a few minutes left, and it's, how do we wildly celebrate a program's end? And I'd love for you to share in the chat pod some of how you celebrate sort of the programs. And we get to work with lots of organizations, and they do, graduations, and they do, certificates. And I think most organizations think about the participants. How do we widely celebrate the program for the participants? Can we shift our thinking here and think, how do we wildly celebrate the program's close or end inside the organization? Like, how do we include more than the participants? And this isn't just about inviting their managers, but it's being really clear that this is something to celebrate. Love all the thoughts in the chat pod as well. Neil, what would you like to add to this?
Yeah, I think we get to the end, particularly if it's a long program, with a sense of "Whew, it's done." I would encourage all of us, to remember that the celebration might be the most important way to generate buzz for the next one. So in addition to a lot of the great ideas we're seeing here, think about things like maybe participants delivering a presentation to their team and their colleagues. or having them do something for their manager about what they learned. So it becomes a cultural experience and not an event. We've got a lot of ideas on this, so if you're interested, reach out to us afterwards and happy to share them with you.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. I do, as I start to bring us to a close, I mean, here's what we started with. You will have access to that guide. We'll get you from our organization. We'll make sure you get a copy of that, which gives you, as Neil suggested, a bit of a worksheet to walk through these 5 phases. I mean, when you think about it, are you crafting a message with a movie trailer or a syllabus? Are you clicking the recipes, or are you cooking them? Do you have a system to cook them? Are you able to get that person, the partner in the gym? Are we able to develop a cohort strategy where we know and we've chosen and we've selected how we're going to have a cohort strategy? And then around culture, are people creating highlight reels for you so that you build that momentum? I want to say thank you. Thanks so much for your engagement. And if there's anything we can do, please reach out to us. Neil, final goodbyes before Liz takes it.
No, you're all doing brilliant work, so let's ensure that the people who can get audience to it understand its value. Thanks very much for participating. We enjoyed it.
Yeah, and certainly you can reach out to us. Our info is here. We'd love to help in any way. And I will turn it back to you, Liz.
Thank you guys. No, I loved a lot of y'all's analogies and even to the point of like the movie theater trailer. Honestly, that's just a good philosophy in life. So as a marketer myself, I was refreshed from this webinar. So I hope you guys as well. And the next time you go to Epcot, I want an invite, but just to put it on air to make sure it happens. But thank you guys so much for this presentation. So for all of my other friends who are still here, though, I do want to invite you for some more events February. Now that we are out of the cold January, we have a lot of events coming up in February and continuing on. So you can check those out now at our website and watch all past webinars now at trainingindustry.com. And all of our webinars are pre-qualified for credit hour by HRCI, SHRM, ISPI, and CBTN. So you can send an email to me or anybody on the TI team, and we will send you those codes as soon as possible. And Annette, yes, we will be sending out the deck as well. If I said CPTM and you are like, what is that, Liz? It is the Certified Professional and Training Management Program that assists you in developing core competencies that will empower you to manage the future training needs of your organization. So you can find more information at trainingindustry.com/training. And I would love to meet you all here in Raleigh, North Carolina for the 2026 Training Industry Conference and Expo. TICE is where learning leaders like you gather to forge new professional connections, you learn from each other, and you address your most pressing learning challenges. So we do have early bird savings all the way to the end of March, so check that out. And lastly, that evaluation survey should have popped open another tab in your browser, and we would appreciate hearing your feedback from today's section. Thank you so much for Joan and Neil and our amazing sponsor, Bluepoint Leadership. But lastly, I want to thank you all for your time and attention today. This was great engagement, and I hope you guys felt inspired as much as I did. I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful week, and I will see you all very soon. Bye, everybody.